Call this meeting of the Plymouth Planning Commission to order. I've got some things to read here real quick. Calling to order the City of Plymouth Planning Commission meeting of May 1st, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. or 6:32 p.m. Members of the public not attending in person may submit written public comment prior to the meeting by emailing your comment to the planning clerk at dknight@cityofplymouth.org or 3:30 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Email and public comments will be distributed to the commission and made part of the official record. This meeting will be recorded. Council chambers are wheelchair accessible. Special accommodations may be requested by contacting the planning clerk 72 hours in advance of the meeting. Please silence all cell phones or similar devices. Oh, we are recording now. All right, Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mickelson,
Here.
Commissioner Shaw,
Here.
Vice Chair Clapper,
Here.
Chair Sullivan.
Here.
Thank you, we have a quorum.
Great, let's all rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To approval of the planning commission regular meeting agenda for May 1, 2025. Is there any public comment for this item from anyone here at City Hall? Is there any written public comment on this? I don't believe so. On number 2, correct?
No.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I second the motion.
Roll call vote, please. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Mickelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes.
Vice Chair Clapper,
Yes.
Chair Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes.
Right, on to number 3, which is public comment. Under provisions of the government code, citizens wishing to address the commission for any matter not on the agenda may do so at this time by completing and submitting the speaker submittal form to the planning clerk or following the instructions noted on this agenda. Speakers will be called by the chair at the point on the agenda when the item will be heard. Speakers should keep comments to 3 minutes or less and state their name and community of residence. Under provisions of the California Government Code, the commission is prohibited from materially discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda unless it can be demonstrated to be of an emergency nature or an urgent need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. Is there anyone at City Hall that would like to make a public comment about anything that's not on today's agenda? Not seeing any hands. All right, we'll close public comment. Number 4 is presentations and appointments. We have none. Number 5, consent calendar items. All matters listed under the consent calendar are to be considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. If discussion is required, that particular item will be removed from the consent calendar and will be considered separately. 5.1, approval of the planning commission regular meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was March 20th, 2025. Is there anyone at City Hall that would like to make a public comment on this item? Seeing no excitement out in the room. Any written comment for this item? I don't believe there is.
No.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Mickelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes.
Vice Chair Clapper,
Yes.
Chair Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes.
All right, now to number 6, public hearings. 6.1, adopt resolution 2025-03 of the Planning Commission of the City of Plymouth, recommending City Council approval for the termination of an existing development agreement for the planned development and adopt resolution 2025-04 of the Planning Commission of the City of Plymouth, recommending City Council approval of Sutter Home Inc.'s rezone of 5 parcels, APNs 008-070-036, 037, 038, 039, and 040 totaling approximately 219.27 acres from agriculture, plan development to ag. Recommendation is to hold a public hearing, receive public testimony, review, discuss, and adopt resolution 2025 and resolution 2025-03 and 2025-04. We're now going to open the public hearing, and the first part of that is for Erica to give a presentation. Erica.
Sutter Home Winery has applied for an application, as mentioned, to rezone their property. I didn't have time to prepare a presentation for tonight, but Dana's pulled the zoning map up for us. You can see Sutter Home is the light green area with the hatch marks on it. Sutter Home Winery was, in 1997, the council adopted resolutions and ordinances zoning this property as agricultural land development. Was under a previous code, so the code did change in 2014, so it was the previous code. So it was zoned to agriculture plan development, and the plan developments have always required a development agreement, a companion development agreement in the city. So with those actions, Sutter Home was annexed into the city and moved forward with building their winery. A negative declaration was approved by the city council in 1997 as well. That was included within the development agreement that's attached to the staff report. That negative declaration was to study these 5 particular properties and what was proposed under the rezone. It was included as part of the larger Burke Ranch environmental impact report. Those mitigation measures, both within the EIR and then again mentioned in the negative declaration, were complied with prior to Sutter Home Winery being the way it is today. In November of 2024, those applications were submitted. Sutter Home expressed a desire to discontinue their operations on the site and would like to hopefully sell the parcels. And so they had requested the removal of the development agreement, which was for a period of 50 years, and then the rezone away from planned development to just agriculture. So there's several components here with this application request. The development agreement, as I mentioned, was entered into in 1997. It's for a period of 50 years. The development agreement restricts what can be done on the property, but the property is zoned ag, so there's limitations within our own code on what can be do in the agriculture zoning district. It's much more strict than, let's say, a residential zoning district. But within the DA, there were several terms, key terms. Most of them have been complied with. So one was there are wells and they can only be used as a secondary water source and for agricultural purposes only. The project was required to pay a fair share contribution for improvements related to water. That's been completed. The applicants were required to comply with the mitigation measures in the negative declaration, which again was completed. There were penalties for non-compliance. They were required to comply with the development plan, which is included within that development agreement. And then they required well monitoring. The city required well monitoring, but that requirement was discontinued in 2002. So the last time that the city monitored the wells and presented data or information on that to the city council was done in 2002, and we haven't done it since. The city attorney, as well as staff, the city engineer and public works reviewed the request, and there were no concerns noted with the cancellation of the DA. It is such a long term. I don't know why it was 50 years. It's hard to say what the reason behind that was way back when, since most of the requirements have been completed. But it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to have a 50-year DA, especially since the project essentially has been constructed and all of our monitoring requirements have been completed. So there's been no concerns among city staff regarding the cancellation of the DA, but they have requested it. As far as the rezone goes, again, back in 1997, it was the zoning designation established for the property was agriculture / planned development. In the map now, it shows it as more of an overlay because that's how our code is now, but prior to that, it again, a different code, and we've just sort of shifted how it's shown on the map, but it was zoned agriculture planned development. And they would like to remove the planned development designation, which again, in this case, for an agricultural property, doesn't make a lot of sense. Typically, when you see a planned development, it's something like Zinfandel Ridge or Greeley Ranch, which is currently in for an application. Those planned developments are important because they establish development standards for the site as well as design guidelines. So those are things that live on because you would need to follow them as the project is built out, as new homes are being built, and then it establishes tailored development standards to that site. So in this case, the planned development doesn't function that way. It functions as a limited development plan for the site. So if the property were to be rezoned to agriculture, they're still restricted to what they can do today. Today it's ag, and tomorrow would be ag if it was approved. The code is very clear on what can be done in the agricultural zoning districts. There are many limitations, and anything that they would do out there requires review and approval by the city based on what they're doing. It's varying levels of review, but again, they are limited to what's in the zoning ordinance for agriculture, both today and if it's rezoned or not, they're restricted to those uses. Of course, if anyone ever desired to change the zoning designation or build a house or whatever the case may be, it will require planning review, and there would be review under the California Environmental Quality Act. It's a change from what's existing. Likewise, if someone submitted a proposal to rezone and redesignate the entire site, there's a long process that goes into it. But because that's not on the table right now, that's not something we can review as a what if. With the rezone, it would be agriculture, and they're required to comply with the development standards, the uses, and then anything they chose to do, such as an accessory structure, they would have to comply with them. As far as the only one concern that the city did have is that there are those on-site wells that I mentioned. And the city does not currently, as a policy, allow residential dwellings to connect to well water. So we do not currently allow that, although it's not in our code. But we will not allow a request for a connection to a well. What we don't want to have happen is if this property sells and then maybe changes hands again and changes hands again, that people are unaware that those wells are only to be used for irrigation purposes. So the applicant has agreed that if the project was to be approved, that they will file a deed restriction, so any future property owners would be aware that those wells are to be used for agricultural. If someone in the future tried to build a house and connect to them, we would say no, but we would like the protection of any future property owners as well as to protect the city, identifying that there's a limited use on these wells. So in conclusion, staff does not have any concerns regarding the cancellation of the DA. Most of those terms have been completed. The development agreement really restricts that property with no benefit to either the property owner or the city at this point. Staff is recommending that you make a recommendation to the city council to approve the cancellation. And then again, with the rezone request would allow them to continue their agricultural operations, would allow them a little bit of flexibility in the site, hopefully to any future property owner. But again, they would be limited to agricultural uses, same as existing, so staff is recommending that you recommend approval to the city council. Again, both of these actions are legislative, so you are making a recommendation to the city council on acting on the project. In regards to CEQA, the project is exempt from CEQA because again, there's no development potential identified in this rezone. I'm not upzoning a property. I'm not changing a designation from, let's say, residential to commercial. It is an agricultural property today, and even if the rezone was approved, it would be an agricultural property after the rezone occurs. So there is no changes to the existing use on site, therefore, no review under CEQA would be required for this reason. Again, any future projects though require review under CEQA. Staff, as required by state law, a notice was both published and then mailed to property owners. Staff received two comment letters. One was included in your packet because we received it in time, and one was received today, or received yesterday and sent to you today. So we do have two comment letters opposing the project. Staff is recommending that you approve the project or make a recommendation to the city council approving the project. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. And the applicant is also here for that. Have questions for them as well.
Okay, I do have a number of questions, but would it be wise to let the applicant maybe
Up to you.
speak first?
So we can do that, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to do that.
Sullivan, members of the Chairman Sullivan, members of the commission, my name is Steve Carroll, I represent a set of home on this project, and Peter Larson and David Caddy will be also tonight if you have any more specific questions of them. Just a couple of overviews. Number one, we greatly appreciate the staff, the planning staff, city manager, the city attorney, who all worked very diligently with us on this project. This is my 46th year of practicing land use law. My wife says don't say that anymore, but I do anyway. And this is the first time I've ever been retained to downzone a property and terminate a development agreement. So it's a first for me. And it obviously is going to cause some questions because it's just a sort of a man bite dog situation. And the real reason we're doing it is that it's probably no secret that the property is being marketed to be sold. And we are finding that the development agreement is imposing an obstacle on us being able to sell the property, because as you well know, purchaser's going to pull a preliminary report of title. It's going to be an exception to title because DAs are reported. And it is of no use. It was kind of funny. We couldn't figure out, no one in the company can figure out why we did this DA. So we met with the city and said, perhaps you can tell us. And they weren't sure either. And the DA really does nothing. Today, if we went and did a vineyard, we would not have to do a DA. And so it's just surplusage. It doesn't do anything. It's not allowing us to proceed with the project. And that's why we're seeking just to be ag zone, as our neighbors are. Now we have whatever rights are in the code. We have nothing more, nothing less by being agriculture. Now, a question at this point is always asked, well, what's going to happen with the property? And in as much as we're selling it, we have no idea. There could be 4 people who buy it, they're gentlemen farmers, and they're gentlemen farmers and they enjoy living there and looking at grapes. It could be one person who has some development aspirations. But the relevant question is, what happens? What is it going to take to get this property to be used for something other than agriculture? And you know this process as well as I do. They're going to have to file an application. They're going to have to go through the CEQA process, probably do an EIR. There's going to be public notices. There's going to be opportunity for public comments. There's going to be 1 or 2 hearings in front of this commission, make recommendations on those documents. The public will be notified and be able to participate. It will then go to the council, and again, there will be public comments, the opportunity. So this isn't a sleight of hand whereby turning it into agriculture, we're able to do something other than what's in your agricultural code. And I just want to assure you and everyone else, there's nothing untoward here. We simply want to have an ag use in an ag zone. That makes sense. What other zone would you put on this property that's a vineyard? Agriculture. That's the only thing that makes sense. And since all of the obligations that we had in the development agreement have been satisfied, and the city no longer requires development agreements to do vineyards, it just doesn't make any sense to do this anymore. It's an extremely practical thing. So we hope you take those comments into account as you make your decision. And again, we agree with the staff report's analysis entirely. We agree with the recommendation. We appreciate the hard work that your staff has put into this. It should be great to work with them. And if we have any questions that Peter, Damien, or I can answer, please try to answer.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. I'll go first. You kind of answered, the answer came up of why you want the change. It's to, kind of help you sell your property, correct? I understand that. Is there anything, is there anybody, any type of buyer that can get around this process that exists? I mean, is anyone who buys that land, are they, do they have to follow what, you were gonna put a deed restriction on it? Would everybody have to follow that?
We're putting a deed restriction on it so that, and I've seen this when I've been in planning departments. Someone buys a piece of property, invariably they blame it on the broker, and they say the broker said we can do this, but of course it's not allowed, and they yell at the court ladder. And what this does is put a deed restriction, so no one can think they can use the well for their house and then go down to the planning department and yell and scream at them, because that deed restriction will be recorded and will be an exception to title when they get their title report. So they will not just have constructive knowledge, they will have actual knowledge that we cannot use that well for domestic water. So when they go into the planning department is gonna say, you had your title report before you closed escrow, you do this.
And that's for any kind of development that happens, that they're all required to follow that.
So even if someone wanted to build a house out there, they have to follow it. It's a protection for the city, as he mentioned, one, because people are not usually informed of certain restrictions on a property sometimes when they buy a parcel, or they're not listening, or whatever the case may be. And so it puts it out there up front that you cannot connect to that for anything other than agricultural irrigation.
And on that same subject, so if we're going over to the deed restriction, I haven't seen the deed restriction yet, I haven't seen a draft, I haven't seen what plans to be in it, there was information the staff report that talked about it, but nothing in there really talked about volume of water, what's getting pumped out of there for somebody afterwards for ag, when it seemed that the prior agreement did.
We don't follow it, so there's no monitoring anymore. So since 2002, there really is no restrictions.
Is there a way to include a restriction in that deed restriction?
We would have to monitor it. So again, that would almost be establishing a secondary development agreement whereby we would agree to monitor a well that we haven't monitored in 22 years. And I just don't know that the city has the resources to do something like that.
I think my concern is, I know the city doesn't use that anymore as a primary water source, but it could be used as a secondary water source as we grow. I believe that's still sort of in place. And then also I worry about the folks, our ag folks and our neighbors in Burke Ranch who are on well water. I certainly worry about somebody coming in there with an ag use that overpumps.
So even today, with that development agreement in place, there is no monitoring. So there is no change from what's existing. Again, the concern about over pumping, we wouldn't know today, right? So I guess that's an existing condition. Certainly the statement about would the city want to take over that well? Probably not. The city is looking at other sources of water. We do contract with the Inland Water Agency. We have others. We're looking at other ways to get water, and I don't believe that the city would want to take over a well on someone's private property. If for some reason down the road we wanted to do something like that, the city would have to enter into some sort of agreement, easement, purchase, things of that nature that isn't covered under this development agreement anyways, so it would still be a change.
I think the city's well, my concern was the city's wells up there are adjacent, they're on the same aquifer.
And I've spoken with engineering and public works, and there was no concern from them, and we specifically discussed the wells, and they had no concerns.
And Chairman Sullivan, if I could just add, besides practicing law this time, I've also been married to a dairy farmer for 42 years. Thank goodness this is a separate property state. And all I hear about are the cost of pumping. And I think two things ought to alleviate your concern. Number one, it's not cheap to pump anymore. And number two, in as much as you have a sensitive crop such as grapes out there, the last thing you want to do is either underwater them or overwater them because you're going to destroy the fruit. And if you, to the extent you're concerned about the aquifer, grapes may be one of the best crops to have out there because of their sensitivity to being overwatered or underwater.
I agree, but then again, that's what's out there now. I'm worried about a different biomass. And if we're kind of no longer monitoring this and volumes could be different, doesn't that trigger CEQA, and why not?
So it is a well, it's a well for agricultural purposes, whether there's more water coming out now or more water coming out later, that is not something that we would review. Now, if someone wanted to take out the grapes and put in a chicken farm or something else, that's entirely different use. We're going to look at it and review it under CEQA and see what they want to do. Anytime you grade, change the characteristics of a site, they'll require planning. It's unusual to have land zoned agriculture within the city. So I realize this is something very different for everyone. Agricultural land is usually in the county. For whatever reason, in 1997, they wanted to be part of the city, so it is our only agriculturally designated land.
Got it, and then why did we stop monitoring?
That was what was in the development agreement. It was only until 2002, and then we no longer monitored it, and there were no issues up until then, and so we stopped. And again, I ran it by Public Works and the engineer because I myself was unclear about why, and they just said we don't use wells in that area anymore, and we had no more concerns.
Okay, and then one last question, were there any defaults noticed by either party of the city or someone during that DA at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, that's all I've got. Colleagues?
Excuse me, I just had two questions. In the staff report, when it talks about the wells, it says that the city prohibits use of wells for residential or commercial purposes. But then if you go to the attorney's letter, it says it acknowledges it's gonna have a deed restriction, it just says for residential use. Is it gonna be restricted for both?
It's restricted, so the way that the deed restriction will be worded is that it is only to be used for agricultural irrigation. So not for landscaping, not because I wanna build a fun pool, not because I want to build a house, whatever the case may be, it's agricultural irrigation.
Okay, and then my second question was just from the public comment from Stephanie Moreno. When she talked about the public hearing notice didn't contain the deadline for submitting written comments before the hearing. Does that affect the legality of this meeting?
So no, we are not required to say when you have to submit public comments. She did also ask that we include email addresses for contacts from now on, and we can do so, we can start doing that, but there is no requirement for including the deadline for comments. This is also only a recommendation, again, so you're not making a decision, and people have a chance to comment again prior to city council, if they chose to do so.
Great, thank you.
Quick question, so you said if this project were to come through today, we wouldn't have a development agreement?
Well, most likely this project was to come through today, they would be in the county, they would not be annexed into the city. LAFCO does not like to annex agricultural land into a city. That being said, if it was to come through today and we had some land and someone wanted to rezone themselves to agriculture, no, we would not do it. I can't say for certain why they did it in 1997. My only guess would be that because of the unusual nature of land being annexed into the city that's agriculture, that we felt somehow that it should be a planned development, but I have no information on what the rationale was behind it at the time.
Anybody else? All right, so we do have a public comment card from say Gary and Dana Lola.
Roulette, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Our concern was probably more confusion than anything, but to give you a little context, in 2019, we bought the 107 acres here on the corner and immediately experienced eminent domain from the county. So when we get these letters, we better take it serious. We've engaged in a aggressive rangeland restoration project, removing the invasives. We put 1,500 tons of compost. We're trying to restore that ground, which was, Joe Pettit received that property from Ulysses S. Grant. We have the original land grant. That original road exists, but we're in the process of restoring that. So it's our home, and we made a significant investment. And Sutter Home has been a good neighbor, don't get me wrong, but we were concerned about several things. The well came up. We're on the downside of that well. Now, we've watched it for a long time. We watched the water table, and the fellow that put our well in knew exactly where to punch the hole because of where that well exists, but we're on the downhill side of it. So without some kind of pumping monitor, our well could go dry. I mean, that could happen. But so we were concerned about water quality. We've done a lot for erosion control. We protect Little Indian Creek. And I think you know this, but you folks have a ditch that runs on the backside of our property that at one point supplied water. And I think that the plume upstream was damaged, and that's the reason it's not there. But that ditch is still functioning. When it rains, it still runs water through it. We were concerned, one of you mentioned what happens if someone else buys it. We were in Jackson when Rancheria came in and started rolling properties. And if they roll in there, our world will change. There's no way around it. We have traffic concerns now. If you've ever tried to pull in our driveway, it's awful. Now, it had to be done because you may remember that head-on collision thing that could happen there. So it was a good thing to do, but I asked the county to slow that thing down, and they didn't do it, but they come through there at 55 miles an hour. So I have 2 or 3 people a year go through the fence. We got to find the horses, make sure nobody got on the road. And that's coming down from the winery. So we had when we saw that, we thought the sole reason for them, for the Sutter Home folks wanted to make a change was because it makes it easier for the casino to come rolling in. And then, as I understand it, they're sovereign. None of us would have any control over it. And you folks have already experienced what the casinos can do. We got construction on the other end that I don't think any of us wanted, and they just rolled right through. So we were concerned about that. Our concern is to make sure that Plymouth is in a really good place. It's a beautiful place. We wanted our ranch to be something that everybody in the community could be proud of. So we're asking for a little help from you folks for some guidance here. I think we talked to these folks before. We think that they're honest in what they're trying to get done. But my fear isn't these folks. My fear is what comes up next and how will it impact our community. So I'm asking for a little guidance from you folks. What can we do to make sure that somebody doesn't, and maybe there's nothing. Dana, did you have anything that I'm missing? Thank you.
Is there, do you have any answers of anything we can do to help?
Unless Sutter Home wanted to voluntarily enter into some sort of agreement about well monitoring, which they're not required to do, because we don't require it now. That would be the only thing. I'm pretty sure they probably don't want to enter into that agreement, not knowing who a future property owner might be, but, oh, sorry. Again, they could sell all 5 properties right now together to someone. And there's nothing you can say about it. We don't monitor the wells, that provision has ended. It is. So to have a new requirement because they've come forward with an application when the existing, let's say, characteristics do not change is a difficult.
So first question, maybe Steve, correct? Yes. You might be able to answer this as well. Is there something that can go in the deed restriction that would be rather vague and say that it could be subject to well monitoring by the city for volume?
Well, let me give a little more historical fact. Those wells predate the development agreement. And It's agricultural wells for agricultural purposes, like everyone else. If the city wants to enact an ordinance where they're going to monitor all the wells in the city, we would be subject to that. Under the DA, we would not, because we protect it, but we're giving up our DA. But I don't understand why you're going to target one property owner to do that when they have a vested right to pump the water from a well that pre-exists the development agreement that we're asking to terminate.
Sure, but you're asking to terminate, would you be amenable to putting a condition on in return for that? You know, kind of a give and take. You're asking the city to do something that could put people's wells and other things in peril. Would it be out of the question, would be not?
There's no evidence of that.
Okay,
I mean, with all due respect, there's no evidence that these wells that have been operating in the same manner since 1997 are causing a problem. I mean, they're operating the same way as they have for what, 28 years? If there would have been a problem, I suspect we would have heard about it now, because how many droughts have we gone through since the state would say 28, but we know that's not true. We've not had, there was no evidence presented, which would have been the logical thing to do, to say, hey, my well, you watered last year, and these guys are responsible for it. But there's no evidence of that.
so you're saying Sutter Home would not be interested in entertaining that for a condition of deed restriction?
No.
Okay. Just ask.
Yeah, Chairman, I think what the speaker, appeared to be trying to say is, how can we protect ourselves in the future? So a future property buyer that buys the property, I think the protection is the existing code, right? And it would have to come through planning and council and get approved, and that's where we would have to have the open and honest and public hearings and discussions. I don't know if we would put a undue burden on an existing owner that really we're not really enforcing the development agreement anyway today. I guess all the conditions have been met, put it that way. So I think that in the future, we would just have to ensure that obviously whoever was interested in buying that property and potentially changing the use, maybe they keep the use, who knows? Or adding a home or whatever the case may be, that we ensure that that's enforced through all the existing city processes that we have. Just like any other development or proposal that would come through our purview. But I don't think we should place an existing undue burden on the applicant.
And in fact, with the deed restriction, it means there's not going to be an increased demand for water. That house is not going to demand water, it's going to have to get city water. So by doing this, you're not increasing the property's demand for that well water, it's staying constant as it has since 97.
If not reduced, if they change away
Yeah.
from grapes, for example.
Yes. Mhm.
Great, and our last commenter also, asked the questions about the tribe, and that kind of goes back to similar to what I was asking earlier. So, because I'm just not clear about this, and I'm sure other people listening to this part as well. If the tribe takes that land, purchases that land, they are still bound by the until it's taken into trust, or is it immediately upon purchase?
If the tribe purchases land and takes it into tribal trust, it is no longer within our purview.
But if it's purchased and not taken into trust, that
It would
deed
still be within
restriction
our
still
purview,
holds.
so if they chose to buy the property for some reason and not put it into trust, yes, it still would have to comply with our zoning ordinance, our municipal code, and our general plan. But the second they take it into trust, it becomes.
Okay, understood.
And there's nothing we can do about it.
And I think another answer to this question, but they did take into trust, but we have no authority over the well water as well.
Nope. It's removed from our, let's say, purview.
Has the tribe shown interest in purchasing this property?
We've had no contact with the tribe, any Native American group.
And just to clarify, if that was saying this is a big supposition, if that were to happen and they put it into trust, that could happen regardless of what we do here tonight.
Yeah,
So that doesn't change.
even if they, let's say, purchase a property and took it into trust tomorrow, that development agreement doesn't mean anything, the zoning doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, if you denied us tonight and said we never want to see your shadow across City Hall ever again, that could happen tomorrow.
Anything else?
Would you mind turning off that?
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in City Hall that would like to make a public comment? Right, let the record reflect that we received written public comment from Stephanie Moreno that will be made part of the public record, and we did read this, and I think some of her questions and somewhat similar to some of our questions, so hopefully that was addressed. And I will close the public hearing. And any discussion between the commissioners on this?
No further questions. I would essentially be in favor of option one.
We don't have a draft of the deed restriction, correct?
I do have a draft now, I'm gonna have the city attorney take a double check on it, and then I can include it in the council packet, it wasn't done in time for this. But we've been working on it, and it is for agricultural irrigation only.
Okay, so like Commissioner Nicholson's question, it addresses that. And council will see that.
I'll have it in the council packet, yeah. It's obviously not recorded because they would like to wait until that it takes effect to record it, just in case something happens and let's say council denies the request. Cause that would make a lot of sense for them to further restrict themselves.
And then what requires it actually to get done after council?
So they've agreed to do it within 30 days of council action, so we will hold them to it, and because it's in the staff report, it's in the resolutions, they'll be required to do so. Or face consequences from the city,
What kind of consequences?
take them to court.
Any other discussion?
I was gonna say, just for me, I was a little hesitant initially, but hearing all the conversation, I kind of understand a little bit more. My biggest fear, I think we've all talked about, and unfortunately, we don't have any control of those kind of things that could happen, whether we deny it or approve it. So that's kind of the things that I just, for the record, is very concerning to me.
Anyone else?
Good.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution recommending city council approval of the cancellation of the development agreement between the city of Plymouth and Sutter Home Winery, and adopt a resolution recommending city council rezone the properties from agriculture planned development to agriculture, ordinance number 97-23.
Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Mickelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes.
Vice Chair Clapperroth,
Yes.
Chair Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes.
Thank you. All right, thank you for coming prepared and giving us information, and thank you guys for coming and commenting as well. All right, on to number 7, unfinished business, we have none. And for new business, under number 8, we have 8.1, part 2 of the review of the modifications of existing requirements related to the objective and design standards from the city of Plymouth. And it's recommended that we discuss and review the proposed amendments prior to holding a public hearing. And we get Erica's presentation. Again, here we go.
So this is part 2 of our discussion of the new design standards for the city. Previous meeting, we discussed some amendments that need to occur to the zoning ordinance. And then some amendments to the downtown combined district design standards to make them more objective. So included within your packet for tonight's meeting is 2 new sets of design guidelines. We have mixed use design guidelines, so a building that is both residential and commercial. And with those, they most likely will also require compliance with the downtown because we do have mixed use zoning in the downtown. So for any mixed use developments in the downtown, they would comply with both, and then outside of that area, obviously they would just comply with the mixed use. So within your packet, you have the proposed objective design standards. Remember, I can no longer be subjective. I have to have very definable, easy to interpret design standards. And there's some photos in there that further enforce what some of the standards are looking for. And then as well as the mixed use, we have multifamily, so apartments, say a condo or townhouse would comply with those standards, and those standards are in there as well. After finishing up with that, I have decided that moving forward, the best and easiest path for the city is I will take those 2 design guidelines plus the downtown, combine it into one document so that there is no confusion. And I will have an introduction that explains how they interact with each other. And then they will form one document so that someone may be searching, they wanna, let's say, build a mixed use project. They don't become unaware of the fact that there are the downtown design guidelines as well. And then in the future, if we ever decided to, we could add to them. Maybe we might wanna do single family design standards at some point, or commercial if we chose to do so. And we can include them all together within one document so that people are aware and it doesn't require you to search. I don't like anyone to have to do a lot of effort to figure out what our rules and regulations are. I prefer to make it easier on everyone. So that would be my proposal. The purpose of tonight's meeting is just to see if you had any comments, concerns, feedback on the design guidelines. At our prior meeting, we had mentioned some additional changes that staff would make to the downtown. And then I found some errors within it as I read it again for the, I don't know how many times. So I'm going to read it again to make sure that there is nothing else that needs to be fixed within those. So there'll be a few changes to that. There are some sections of it that don't comply with the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance was amended in 2014, and I think someone forgot to go back and change some sections of those design guidelines. So there is a conflict, and I'll just clean them up now. So the intent is that I'll fix them up and we will start public hearings in June, maybe July, depending on what's scheduled for some upcoming planning commission meetings. We do have ARCO coming up. So I don't want to crowd the calendar with this because it's a big package of items. So we'll get those, or I will get those all wrapped together and then hopefully be ready before you for a public hearing soon. So they'll take effect. But that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to, if you have questions on them, if you have comments, go through.
Anybody have any questions or comments? I think it looks great, and I like your idea of putting it all together and making it easier. I think that's excellent. All good?
Yeah, I agree with Mike too. I don't have any questions, and I just want to commend you for all your hard work, and I know it's a big project and you're definitely making an impact, so thank you.
Yeah, it seems pretty easy to follow, like the way it's written, it's very user friendly, which is really nice. Cause I think people have a tendency to think to think that ordinances overcomplicate things, and it doesn't need to be that way.
Great, I don't see anyone in City Hall, but is there anyone I don't see who would like to make a comment? All right, and Dana, correct, we didn't have any written public comment on this.
No, we didn't.
Great, there's no vote needed on that, so thank you, we can move on. All right, and on to number 9, reports. Any commission reports? All right, as the chairperson, I do not have any reports. Planning director?
The only item I have is the ARCO gas station car wash mitigated negative declaration. The public notice will be published in the newspaper tomorrow and will also be mailed to everyone within 300 feet. And starting on Monday, the mitigated negative declaration will be open for public comment. So it's a 30-day comment period, and anyone can comment on it. It will be posted on the city's website. It will also be posted through the state's portal, which is Sequinet. Anyone chose to want to look at it there. So it will be available as well as at City Hall if anyone would like to review and make comments before the 30-day deadline closes. Within that notice, we've also identified the date of public hearing, which will be hopefully June 19th. So on June 19th, the project, together with the mitigated negative declaration, will come before the Planning Commission. Because this project requires a rezone, you will be making a recommendation to the City Council, since none of the items can be approved without that rezone. So you'll be.
And then just refresh my memory, so people make comments, and then do those come to us, or do those go to you guys and you make adjustments in the product that comes to us?
So anyone can make a written comment, email, letter, however they want to make it. That would come to City Hall and staff. You are not required under CEQA to respond to comments in a mitigated negative declaration, unlike an EIR, where we are required to respond to comments. The city can choose to do so if they wish to. It's hard to say what direction we will go in. It just really depends on those comments, and if we felt that we needed to address them. So I can't say whether there would be a formal responses to comments. But those comments are public record, and so when the project comes before you, we will include them so that you have them within the packet.
Great, and just for anyone listening, could you say again what's the best way to do that?
There's several things you can do. If you have questions, you can always feel free to call me or Dana, and or the planning main line, and Dana and Knight are very helpful planning extraordinaire. Will either answer your question or she will get you in touch with me, the planning director, and I'd be happy to answer questions, walk you through how to comment, whatever your need is. You can mail a written letter to the city with comments. You can email a letter to the city with comments. You can drop off a letter if you chose to do so. It can be handwritten, it can be typed, it does not matter. As long as you make that comment, we will accept it.
And in this day and age when people are busy and obviously we don't have a packed house for meetings, obviously for people listening or reading these minutes later, I would encourage you to comment on all of these projects, because that's how we find out what people in the city want us to do as their representatives. Great, and then there was also something else about, I think Dana sent out about something else coming up with.
Nettie's table will be before you at the May 15th Planning Commission meeting. Nettie's table is going into the building 9393 Main Street, the green awnings. They have 2 applications before the city. One is a minor design review. They're gonna replace that front window, and they're going to take off the awnings, and then they're putting a little patio in the back, so it qualifies as a minor design review. So it's staff level. So in accordance with the code, we are required to post a notice at City Hall and on the property, notifying the public that in 10 days from the date of the notice, that I would render a decision. I think we're on day 7. I believe I can issue a decision Monday at 5. Monday at 5 is the for any comments on it. And again, anyone can come into City Hall and look at the plans. They can call me if they have any questions, or email if they prefer not to talk to a person, or provide comments. But if no comments are received, the decision to approve will get issued on Monday after 5. Tuesday after 5. If people did have comments, we worked through it before we issued the decision, most likely. But then, they will also be before the planning commission for a conditional use permit, because our code requires that if you have alcohol in a restaurant, you need a conditional use permit.
Is that unusual?
Yes.
Is that something that the council has to fix?
If we wanted to change it, we would have to amend the zoning ordinance. I don't necessarily agree with it, because with a restaurant, it's typical that you have alcohol sales. Most cities limit like the bar area within a restaurant, so I couldn't have call it a bar, it's like really a bar, but I call it a restaurant because, you know, 10% of that space is a restaurant, so they'll limit it to whatever the case may be. Unfortunately for Nettie's Table, and another one's gonna get caught up in it, I can't change the code before they wanna operate, so they have to go through this process. If you indicated that you wanted to take a closer look at this requirement, we can put it up for a future study or a study session probably. Maybe, it depends. To change that, because I just don't want people to have to go through an undue process to operate a business in the downtown especially. Conditional use permits are time and materials, they can be quite costly. You know, there's a deposit involved and all my time gets charged to them. Writing a staff report takes some time, writing a resolution takes some time. Public hearing, that's my time, all of it gets charged to them.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I speak for everybody on this commission, that we want to make it easier to do business in Plymouth, especially on our main street. So, I, for one, if everybody agrees, would like to see that come back at a study session within the next few months, because I think that's important. I think that's something we need to fix, because somebody can just go to Amador City or Sutter Creek probably, or the county and open something up, not have to go through that expense and trouble and time. So I think it's important to take a look at that.
What I can do is I can bring the use list for the downtown back as a larger discussion, and we can go through and see if there's anything else that we think is kind of placing a burden on business in downtown. We don't wanna open it up like crazy, you still wanna have focused uses within the downtown, but the alcohol one caught me off guard.
Okay, I would like that a lot. That would be great. Please do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, I think Dana, you're the only other city staff here. Do you have anything for us?
You don't have a comment?
Oh, sorry.
I just have a quick question, do they wanna put a full bar like spirits or just wine and beer or? That's just curiosity.
Yeah, so I believe their plan is to do a full bar. That being said, it is hard to get a liquor license in Amador County. So they will end up starting off with whatever they can start off with, but their conditional use permit would be crafted in such a way that whenever they can get the full liquor license, if they're unable to do so, it would be within the parameters of that conditional use permit. Again, to change the code, because there's a planning commission meeting first, a study session, then a planning commission meeting, then a city council meeting, then a second reading, you're looking at several months for anything to change. So unfortunately, these two businesses happen to come up within weeks of each other, where there's nothing I can do to change it to help them out at this point, unless they wanted to wait.
Let's get it going sooner than later, so nobody else has to deal with that, hopefully, and to those businesses, we appreciate their patience for sure with this process. Right, anything for city staff?
Not at this time.
Anything at all from anybody else? No. All right, let's adjourn this meeting at, are we 7:31? Meeting adjourned.